The sky was gray over the old man's cabin, and the wind carried the sound of dry leaves scratching against metal walls. Tom sat alone beside his fire, listening to static on his broken radio. For years, no signal had come through, but that night, something strange happened. A soft sound broke the silence. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but it felt like a cry, weak and distant. Tom stood up, eyebrows pulled low. He turned the knobs, adjusted the antenna. The sound came again, clearer this time, like someone small, whispering for help. He stared out the window, stars shining like cold eyes in the sky. That signal, it didn't come from Earth. It came from somewhere out there, far beyond the mountains. Tom didn't want to get involved. He had left the world behind years ago, but something in that cry pulled at his heart. He sighed, stood slowly, and went to his old ship resting behind. The cabin, covered in dust and silence. It hadn't flown in years, but it still worked, barely. He loaded a few supplies and launched toward the signal's direction, following the weak trail like a ghost in the stars. The journey was rough. The ship shook, lights flickered, but Tom pressed on. After 3 hours, he reached the source, a small rocky planet with nothing but sand and wind. The scanner picked up one life form, faint and fading fast. He landed and stepped out, the dry wind hitting his face. The sky was a burnt orange, and the ground cracked under his boots. He walked toward a broken shuttle, half buried in sand. It looked like it had crashed weeks ago. Inside, it was quiet. Tom's flashlight moved across the floor, then stopped. There, in the corner, was a small figure curled up like a dying bird. It was a child, a girl, maybe 7 or 8. Her skin was pale blue, almost white, and her limbs thin like sticks. She looked up at him with big glowing eyes, full of fear and hunger. She didn't speak. She didn't even blink. She just watched him, frozen. Tom knelt beside her, slowly, gently. She flinched but didn't run. He reached into his bag and pulled out a food bar. She sniffed it, then turned away, weak and shivering. "I'm not here to hurt you," Tom said softly, knowing she couldn't understand him, but hoping she felt his calm voice. He wrapped a blanket around her and lifted her. In his arms, she was light, too light, like she hadn't eaten in days, maybe more. As he carried her back to the ship, he noticed something strange. Where his hand touched her skin, a soft light appeared, like a faint blue glow under her skin. It vanished after a second. Tom blinked, confused, but said nothing. He brought her aboard and laid her on a small bed in the back of the ship. She stayed quiet, eyes following him, never looking away. He offered her water, and this time she drank, just a few sips, then closed her eyes. The ship lifted off and headed back to Earth. Tom kept looking over his shoulder, unsure of what he had just found. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she alone? That night, back at the cabin, he tried to contact someone, anyone, but the radio went dead again. The girl slept, curled up in a ball, breathing slow and quiet. The next morning, something new happened. Tom found the girl standing near the window, staring at the rising sun. She was humming a soft broken tune, almost like a lullaby. Then she stopped and fell to the floor, unconscious. Tom rushed to her side, panic rising in his chest. She was burning up, her skin glowing faintly again. He scanned her with the ship's old med kit, but it didn't recognize her biology. It only blinked a red warning. Unknown life form, unstable condition. He sat beside her all day, cooling her with wet cloths, feeding her tiny drops of water, watching over her like she was his own child. At sunset, she opened her eyes and looked straight at him, and then she did something that froze Tom where he sat. She smiled, just for a moment, but that small smile was not normal. It was calm, knowing, like she had seen into his soul and found something worth trusting. Tom leaned back in his chair, his old heart beating heavy. He didn't know who she was or what she could do, but one thing was clear. She wasn't just a lost child, she was something else. And the stars weren't done with her yet. The girl didn't speak for 2 days. Tom kept feeding her warm broth, letting her sleep, cleaning her wounds with care. She didn't cry, didn't laugh, didn't even move much. She just watched him. Her glowing eyes always following, never blinking for long. It was on the third night when Tom noticed something strange. He had left the girl asleep and went outside to gather firewood. But when he returned, she was standing near the old music box on the shelf, the one that hadn't played in years. The lid was open, and the little metal ballerina spun slowly. Tom froze. He hadn't touched that box in over a decade. It was broken. Its gears had rusted years ago. She was humming again, soft, the same tune as the box. Her hand hovered over it, not touching, but something invisible was moving between her fingers and the machine, energy, like waves in the air. Then she fell again, like a puppet with cut strings. Tom rushed forward and caught her before she hit the floor. Her skin was hot again, glowing just like before. He whispered to her, "It's okay, you're safe now." But deep inside, he knew something bigger was happening. He ran another scan using the ship's eye. It repeated the same thing. Unknown. Biology, unstable condition. But this time, it added something new. Unregistered tech interface detected. Tom stared at the girl sleeping on the cot. What did that mean? She was a child, starving, weak, but somehow, she had activated an old music box without touching it. Somehow, her body had energy inside it, something not human. Later that night, while Tom sat by the fire, thinking of what to do, the girl woke up and walked to the window again. Her bare feet made no sound. She pointed to the sky, to a cluster of stars just above the trees. Tom came over and stood beside her. "Is that where you're from?" he asked. She didn't answer, but her finger traced shapes in the air. Glowing lines left behind. The shapes looked like a map, old and broken, but still alive in her memory. Then she spoke a single word. "Safe." Tom's heart jumped. It was. The first time she said anything, her voice was small, soft, like wind through dry leaves. Then she fell again, unconscious, even colder than before. Tom wrapped her in every blanket he had. But nothing helped. It was like she was shutting down. He placed her near the heater and sat beside her, refusing to sleep. While she rested, the ship's wall flickered. Strange symbols began to appear, thin blue markings that glowed like stars. They weren't there before. Tom checked the metal, cold, smooth, untouched, but now glowing with unknown language. The next morning, Tom heard something outside. Footsteps crunching snow, not animal, human. He opened the door slowly. A black drone hovered outside, scanning the cabin. It wasn't military, but it wasn't local either. Tom stepped out, his shotgun ready. The drone backed away, then zipped off into the sky. Tom's blood ran cold. Someone had tracked the signal. Someone knew he had found something. He checked the ship logs. A warning flashed. Unauthorized scan detected, location exposed. He went back inside, looked at the sleeping girl, and realized what he had to do. He couldn't stay here, not anymore. Whoever was looking for her, they weren't coming to help. They were coming to take. As Tom packed the emergency bag and powered up the old ship, the girl opened her eyes again. This time she didn't smile. She looked afraid. She reached out and grabbed his hand, gripping tightly. Her skin glowed faintly, and a single tear fell down her cheek. She didn't want to go back, and Tom knew, whatever she was, she had already been through something no child should ever face, and now, whoever hurt her once, was coming again. The sound of engines broke the mountain silence, deep and sharp, like knives cutting through air. Tom looked up from his ship's console and saw the sky flicker. A shadow moved through the clouds, fast, too fast to be a bird or weather drone. Had been right. They were coming. Inside the cabin, the girl stood still, her eyes glowing again, not with power, but with fear. She looked toward the ceiling like she could see what was coming before it arrived. Tom grabbed his gear, shoved old food packs into a bag, and powered the ship's systems. His hands shook, not from age but from the unknown. He had fought in wars, crossed dead planets, seen things people wouldn't believe. But this This was something different. He wasn't just protecting a lost child anymore. He was standing in front of something ancient and dangerous and pure. The scanner beeped 3 times. 3 small ships entered the atmosphere, cloaked, but leaking faint traces of energy. Not military, not rescue. These were hunters. They didn't knock. The girl sat beside the heater, holding the broken music box in her hands. She stared at it, then at Tom, and whispered something he couldn't hear. The box blinked once, then stopped moving again. The cabin lights flickered, and then the door burst open, not with force but with silence. 3 tall figures stepped inside, armored dark like the night sky. Their eyes were hidden behind smooth silver masks, and their weapons hummed softly. They didn't ask questions. They scanned the room. Then one of them pointed at the girl. Tom stepped in front of her, his old shotgun raised. "You're not taking her," he growled. His voice was calm, but inside, his chest felt like it might break. The leader raised a hand, fingers crackling with a strange blue light. The weapon wasn't from Earth, or any human tech Tom had seen. Tom pulled the trigger without thinking. But the shot passed through empty air. The figure had vanished and appeared behind him in a blink. The girl stood now shaking, her hands opened slowly, and between her palms, a soft pulse of light formed. Not fire, not energy, something deeper, older. Tom turned, eyes wide, and saw her whisper again. The walls of the cabin began to glow. Symbols lit up across the wood and steel, glowing with the same blue light from the first night. Then the attackers froze, not by choice, their bodies locked, twitching like machines caught in static. Girl walked toward them, her steps silent. She touched the air in front of one, and his weapon powered down. He fell to his knees like a puppet with cut strings. She moved to the next, and the same happened. The third tried to run, but the music box on the shelf suddenly played a sharp broken note, and he collapsed without a sound. Then everything went quiet. The light faded from the girl's hands, and her knees gave out. Tom caught her before she fell. Her body was cold, too cold. He wrapped her in blankets, whispering, "It's okay, you're safe," even though he wasn't sure if it was true anymore. He looked around at the bodies on the floor, not dead, but trapped, their suits still humming. Faintly, Tom didn't know what kind of power the girl used, but it wasn't just power, it was control. Something deeper, something ancient. The cabin now felt smaller, like the world outside had become dangerous in ways he couldn't understand. He looked at the girl in his arms, her face peaceful now, eyes closed, breathing soft. Who was she? Why could she control machines without touching them? Why were they hunting her? And most of all, what would come next? Because Tom knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The wind outside was quiet again. But Tom didn't trust it. Nothing felt real anymore, not after what he saw. 3 armored strangers, frozen without a fight by a little girl who had never spoken more than one word. He buried the bodies deep in the snow, not because they were dead, but because he didn't know what else to do. They were breathing, barely locked in some kind of sleep. Like statues made of skin and metal. One of them had a symbol on his chest, sharp and jagged. Tom copied it down, but it made his fingers tremble just to look at it. The girl hadn't woken up since the fight. Her skin stayed pale, her breathing slow. Sometimes her hands twitched like she was dreaming. Other times her lips moved without sound. Tom tried everything: food, warmth, light, but nothing brought her back. She was there, but also far away, lost in something deeper. He sat by her side day and night, watching over her like a storm might come crashing through the door at any second, and maybe it would, because the more time passed, the more the ship began to change. One morning, the lights inside flickered, and then the screen on the wall lit up. It wasn't the ship's normal interface. Instead, it showed symbols. Same blue writing that had appeared before, only this time it moved like it was alive, like it was watching him. Tom reached out and touched the screen. The moment his finger brushed the glass, the display changed. A soft voice echoed in the room, not from the ship's eye, but something else. Something calm and sad, it showed him. Images quick, broken flashes like memories. A planet burning, cities falling, children running, shadows hunting them through the sky. Then, a glowing room with floating lights and a circle of children. Hands outstretched toward a tall being made of light. And then only one child remained. The girl alone. Tom stumbled back, heart pounding. He looked at the girl again. She was one of them. The last of something old and powerful, something hunted to near extinction. And now she was in his care, under his roof, surrounded by trees and snow, hiding from the stars. Later that night, she finally opened her eyes. Her voice came in a whisper, weak but steady. "They found me again." Tom leaned close. Who? Who found you?" She looked at him with tired eyes. "The ones who made me forget." Before he could ask more, she reached into the blanket and pulled something out, a glowing shard like crystal. Small but pulsing with soft blue light. She placed it in his hand. It was warm, but the warmth wasn't fire. It was memory. The moment it touched his skin, Tom saw more. The girl, standing in a chamber of glass, wires connected to her back. Tall machines around her scanning every part of her mind. Voices speaking in a language not made for humans. And above it all, a message repeated again and again. "Control the child. Control the key." Tom dropped the crystal, breathing hard. The girl looked at him, quiet but calm. "They erased my voice. They feared what it could do." He understood now. Her silence wasn't natural, it was forced. Her power wasn't just in her hands or mind, it was in her words. That one word she had spoken, safe, had stopped drones and hunters. Imagine what more she could say if she remembered everything. He reached for her hand, held it gently. "I'll protect you," he said, and meant it. But even as he said the words, alarms lit up across the ship's screen. A signal was coming fast. Not just a scan, but a direct message that wasn't human. It was from something orbiting just above Earth. Tom played the message. The screen blinked once. Then a voice spoke through the cabin, deep and cold. "Return the lost one, or Earth will burn." The girl didn't move. She simply stared into the fire, and Tom, heart steady, walked to the control panel and started preparing the ship. If they wanted her back, they'd have to come through him first. The ship lifted off quietly into the night sky, engines humming low. Tom's hands were steady on the controls, but his thoughts moved like a storm. The little girl sat behind him, buckled in, her eyes half closed but alert, watching every blinking light around her. She didn't speak, not since the warning came. But Tom didn't need words to know she was scared. The stars outside the window looked peaceful, but he knew better. Something was out there, circling Earth like a predator waiting for a mistake. He'd seen enough battles in his past to know when someone was drawing a line in the sand. The message had been clear: give her back or face fire. Tom had no plan, no allies. Just a ship older than most satellites and a girl who could barely stay conscious. But he wasn't turning back. He had promised her safety. And even if it cost him everything, he would keep that promise. He set course for an old mining colony hidden on the edge of Saturn's rings. It was abandoned, forgotten after a reactor meltdown years ago. But Tom remembered it well. One of his old war buddies had left something behind there, a hidden room with tools, fuel, and a communication relay not tracked by government eyes. If they could reach it, they might buy some time, maybe even find help. But just as the ship passed Mars, a false star appeared behind them. It blinked once, then grew larger. Not a star, a ship. Tom's radar screamed with red signals. A vessel was approaching fast, bigger than his newer, and heavily armed. He swore under his breath and pushed the engines harder. The girl leaned forward, her small hand resting on the wall beside her seat. The ship shuddered, and then suddenly jumped forward with a burst of speed Tom hadn't programmed. The girl didn't speak, but her fingers traced something on the metal symbols that lit up, barely visible. The ship was responding to her again. Whoever she was, whatever lived inside her, it could bend technology in ways Tom didn't understand. But he was starting to trust it. The pursuing ship opened fire, blue plasma bolts streaking past their tail. One clipped the engine housing, shaking the whole vessel. Sparks flew, alarms screamed. Tom fought the controls, barely keeping the ship steady. A second shot was coming, locked in and glowing. The girl closed her eyes. The lights inside the ship dimmed. Then a low pulse traveled through the hull, like the ship was breathing with her. The enemy's next shot curved off target, slamming into empty space. And the attacker suddenly spun out of control. Tom gasped, staring at the scanner. It wasn't luck, she had done that. But it had cost her something. Her nose bled. Her skin turned pale again. She fell back in the chair, too weak to hold herself. Up, Tom guided the ship into the rings of Saturn. Using the dust and rocks as cover, they reached the old mining base just in time. Docking in the lowest chamber deep inside the rock, he carried her in his arms, feet rushing through dust and broken metal. The base was still cold, dark, forgotten, but the hidden room was intact. Power flickered to life when he slammed the override switch. Inside were old supplies, med kits, and one working transmitter. He laid her down gently on a cot, her breathing shallow, chest rising slow. She opened her eyes and whispered 2 words. This time, they're coming. Tom turned to the screen and sent a signal blast into deep space. He didn't know if anyone was listening, but he had to try. He sent one message over and over. The same short sentence, "She's the last, help us." Then he grabbed his weapon, stood by the door, and waited. Above them, hidden by rings and silence, the hunters were already moving, and Tom knew there would be no more running. The walls of the old mining base shook as the first blast hit. Dust fell from the ceiling like ash. Tom stood at the entrance with his weapon raised. His hands didn't tremble, but his breath came slow and deep. He had fought in wars, but this was different. He wasn't fighting for a cause. He was standing for a child who had no one else. The girl lay inside the storage room, curled in a blanket. Her eyes were half open, glowing faintly. She could feel them outside. The ones chasing her. The ones who wanted to take her back. Not because they cared, but because they feared what she might become. Tom checked the cameras. 3 ships had landed above the surface. Armored troops moved through the tunnels. They were careful, scanning everything, speaking in a language the base's translator couldn't decode. But Tom didn't need words to understand their goal. They wanted the girl alive, but only just like she was a tool, not a person. He set up old explosives in the lower hallway. Slow charge, homemade, but strong enough to stall them. He knew it wouldn't stop them forever, but it might buy a few minutes. He walked back to the girl, knelt beside her, and held her hand. "You don't have to fight," he said. "Not if it hurts you." But she shook her head slowly. Her voice came like wind through glass. "They will never stop." She sat up, weak, but determined. Then she opened her palm, and the glowing crystal appeared again. Tom had almost forgotten it, but now it pulsed brighter, faster, like a heartbeat. She placed it against her chest, and it sank into her skin, disappearing in a flash of soft blue light. Her body lit up, not like before, not just her hands or eyes. This time it was everything. Her veins glowed, her skin shimmered. Even the air around her changed. And then the base itself began to respond. Old lights flickered back to life. Dead screens displayed strange data. The metal in the walls pulsed like it was alive again. Tom backed away slowly, staring in silence. She walked forward. Barefoot, weak but steady, she moved to the central control console, placed her hand on it, and whispered one word: "Awaken." The floor rumbled, and a hidden section of the base opened behind them, revealing a deep chamber. Inside was something ancient, a machine, or maybe a living system round. Silent, but humming now with power. Tom didn't understand what it was, but the girl seemed to know. She walked into the center and sat cross-legged, the machine lighting up around her like a protective shell. She looked at Tom with soft eyes, filled with something deeper than fear. "I can stop them, but it may take all of me." Tom stepped forward, voice breaking. "No, don't. There has to be another way. She smiled faintly. You gave me life, Tom. Now I'll use it. The first intruders burst through the outer corridor. Tom fired, holding them off as best he could. His traps slowed them down, but they kept coming, armored and silent. Their weapons were strange, humming with dark energy. He was pushed back, step by step, toward the chamber. Then the sound changed. Not the roar of guns or footsteps, but silence, heavy, sharp, perfect. Every enemy in the tunnel froze, their weapons dimmed, their eyes wide behind their masks. One dropped his rifle, another fell to his knees, shaking. Something invisible pressed on them like pressure from every side. But it came from nowhere. The girl began to rise in the air, surrounded by a soft blue glow. The machine behind her spun faster, symbols floating in the air like stars. She opened her mouth and spoke, not in pain, but with power. Her words were not human, not alien. They were something older, something that carried weight, meaning, command, and with each word, the base shook, but not from damage, from awakening. The intruders turned and ran. Some screamed, others crawled. Tom watched, unable to move, not out of fear, but awe. And then, with one final word, the light burst from her chest, spreading through the tunnels like a wave, not burning, not crushing, cleansing. When the light faded, she fell. Tom caught her before she touched the ground. Her body was cold, her glow was gone, and for the first time, she looked like a normal child again. Tom held the girl in his arms as the last glow faded from her skin. She was still breathing, but only just. Her heartbeat was slow, her face pale. Her power was gone, or sleeping, or maybe used up completely. Tom didn't know which, and he didn't care. All he saw was a child, fragile and quiet, who had given everything to protect him. The base around them was silent. The strange energy had vanished. The old metal walls were cracked but still standing. The lights dimmed one by one, as if the place was saying goodbye. Tom looked around the ruined chamber, the ancient machine now cold and lifeless, and he felt a deep ache in his chest. He whispered her name, not that he ever truly knew it, but the name he had started calling her in his mind. Star. Her eyelids moved, just a little, and she breathed his name back, not with sound, but with feeling. Above them, the stars shifted. A fleet had been watching from orbit, silent, waiting. But they were gone now. Their ships turned away, leaving without a trace whatever they had come for. They no longer had the strength to chase it, or the will. She had spoken in the language they all feared, the one that couldn't be controlled. It was not power from violence, but from truth. It was old, pure, and it had reminded them of something long buried, something even monsters remembered. Tom wrapped her in his coat and carried her to the ship. He didn't run this time. He walked slow, careful, like she might break, like she was made of starlight and breath. Back on Earth, no one believed him at first. The scan showed a child with no strange readings. Her blood looked normal, her body weak but stable. The scientists poked and questioned, but found nothing. As if all the power had burned away with the stars. Tom didn't fight them. He just stayed by her side, held her hand, told stories while she healed. She listened with soft eyes. Still quiet, but no longer afraid. Weeks passed and the world moved on. News forgot the strange lights seen over Saturn. The sky was quiet again, but Tom knew better. The silence was not peace. It was respect. One morning, she sat up on her own. Her voice was clear now, full of light. I dreamed of a field. She said, there were flowers, and you were there. He smiled, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. That's a good dream. She nodded. Can we go there someday? Yes, he said. We can go anywhere you want. Later he signed the papers. Simple forms, nothing special. A legal adoption. They asked him why he wanted to take responsibility for a child with no known origin. He only said one thing. She called me family. They didn't ask again. He took her home, back to the cabin in the mountains, where snow fell gently and the fire burned warm. She helped him fix the broken music box, And now it played a new tune, one she hummed softly as she watched the trees sway in the wind. At night, she looked at the stars, not with fear, but wonder, and sometimes Tom would catch her speaking to them in that old forgotten language like a prayer or a song. He never asked what she said. He didn't need to know because he had already heard the only word that mattered, Father, and that was enough.